Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving straight into a biological mystery that honestly sounds like it belongs in a high fantasy novel. Imagine there's this invisible border, a hidden line drawn right across the Earth where the fundamental rules of wildlife just abruptly change. It's literally like stepping through a portal where one kingdom of creatures suddenly ends and a totally different one begins. We're talking about the Wallace Line. It's this incredible story of geography, evolution, and the sheer staggering scale of deep time. So let's just get right into it.
Okay, picture this. If you're on the western side of this invisible line, you've got classic Asian ancestry. We're talking dense, humid tropical forests packed with exactly the kind of apex predators and megafauna you'd expect in mainland Southeast Asia. You know, stealthy tigers, massive roaming elephants, heavy rhinoceroses, and a canopy absolutely alive with chattering primates. But cross over just a tiny bit to the east of the line and the picture completely flips. All of a sudden, the landscape is dominated by wildlife with a very distinct Australian ancestry. You're seeing quirky marsupials like tree kangaroos and cuscuses up in the branches, along with just spectacular birds, raucous cockatoos, birds of paradise showing off these insanely complex feathers. It's such an abrupt, almost jarring shift in biodiversity. Honestly, at first glance, it defies all logic.
So who actually figured this out? Well, this massive division was identified by the brilliant British naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace back in the mid-19th century. And look, Wallace wasn't exactly taking a luxury cruise through the Indonesian archipelago. The guy spent 8 years out there enduring some really extreme conditions. We're talking severe bouts of tropical malaria, navigating treacherous waters in these tiny little boats, all to collect tens of thousands of animal specimens. And during all this painstaking work, Wallace noticed this hidden border weaving its way right through neighboring islands. Specifically, running between Borneo and Sulawesi, and then down between Bali and Lombok. There's no giant mountain range there, no massive physical wall. To the naked eye, it's just open ocean.
And here is the proximity puzzle that absolutely baffled those early explorers. In some places along this line, these islands are separated by literally just a few kilometers of water. If you were a 19th century explorer pulling up to these shores, you'd think it was perfectly logical for animals to just move freely back and forth between them. I mean, a bird could easily fly across that gap, right? A strong swimmer could paddle it, or a small mammal could just float across on some fallen trees after a storm.
Yet the wildlife on either side told a completely different story, which brings us to the ultimate puzzle here. Why on earth did such nearby islands host entirely different animal communities? Why wouldn't a tiger just swim over to where the tree kangaroos were hanging out? Why didn't the cockatoos just fly across that narrow strait to the next island over? This isn't just some quirky trivia fact. It's a profound mystery. And to solve it, we have to look way past what's visible on the surface today.
We actually have to travel deep into the Earth's geological past, rewinding millions of years to the Pleistocene epoch, right into the heart of the great ice ages. Here's how it works. First, huge amounts of the planet's water get locked up in massive glaciers stretching across the globe. Second, because all that water is frozen solid on land, global sea levels drop massively. We're talking hundreds of feet lower than they are right now. Third, this dramatic drop exposes the shallow ocean floors, forming these vast continuous land bridges between islands that used to be totally isolated. And finally, those dry land bridges suddenly become vibrant superhighways, letting continental animals migrate across these huge new territories on foot.
Basically, these temporary land bridges acted like natural extensions of the continents. To the west of the Wallace Line, islands like Borneo, Java, and Bali were suddenly directly hooked up to the Asian continental shelf. So animals from mainland Asia could literally just walk across these newly formed plains and settle all throughout that western region. Meanwhile, the islands to the east of the line were hooked up to the Australian continental shelf, which let Australian species spread out from their mainland. Essentially, you had two massive, completely separate continents reaching deep into this archipelago and bringing their completely different ecosystems right along with them.
But, and this is a crucial but, the two sides didn't quite meet in the middle. This is where we meet the main culprit of our mystery, deep water channels. Because even when global sea levels hit rock bottom during the freezing peak of the ice ages, not all of the ocean dried up. There were specific ancient trenches in the ocean floor that were so insanely deep they stayed totally submerged. These weren't just gentle little streams, they were dark, plunging abysses that remained completely impassable obstacles for land animals, no matter how low the sea level got.
Probably the most famous of these barriers is the Lombok Strait, running right between the islands of Bali and Lombok. This deep water trench formed an impenetrable wall. And it wasn't just deep, it acted as a funnel for these incredibly fast, violent ocean currents that would quickly sweep away anything trying to paddle across.
So even though the islands looked super close, literally close enough to see the trees on the opposite shore, that deep, rushing water meant that most land animals absolutely could not cross from the Asian side to the Australian side, or vice versa. It was essentially an impossible moat.
And the consequence of that deep water moat comes down to a pretty simple formula. Millions of years of isolation equals independent evolution. Because these species were completely trapped on their respective sides of the Lombok Strait and those other deep channels, their gene pools just couldn't mix. Over millions of years, the animals on the western side adapted and evolved with their Asian relatives in one evolutionary bubble, while the animals on the eastern side were doing their own completely independent thing alongside their Australian relatives in another. That prolonged, intense isolation is exactly what created that jarring contrast in biodiversity that Wallace noticed.
Now, modern science tells us the story doesn't actually end with a strict, razor-thin wall. Today, we recognize a broader, more transitional region known as Wallacea. This covers islands like Sulawesi, the Moluccas, and parts of eastern Indonesia. It's this incredibly complex, fascinating gray area where that strict line kind of blurs. Wallacea contains this chaotic, beautiful mix of both Asian and Australasian species that have somehow managed over countless millennia to bridge the gaps. It's a zone where the hard and fast rules of the Wallace Line finally begin to bend.
And because it's such a unique transitional zone, Wallacea is basically an unparalleled natural laboratory. You've got animals from completely different evolutionary backgrounds coexisting, overlapping, and sometimes even directly competing for the exact same resources. Researchers from all over the world head out there today to figure out exactly how species migrate across difficult terrain, how they adapt to totally alien environments, and to study the real-time processes of speciation. It is absolutely one of the most scientifically valuable spots on Earth for understanding how life adapts.
So what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway here is that this invisible line reveals a much bigger picture about what truly shapes life on Earth. We aren't just talking about where birds and mammals live anymore. The Wallace Line highlights the massive, unseen power of plate tectonics slowly grinding away beneath the crust, the wildly shifting sea levels of our planet's past, and deep, deep geological history. It's proof that invisible, ancient underwater features dictate the reality of life on the surface today. We are literally living on a canvas painted by deep time.
There's this brilliant quote that I really want you to think about. The distribution of species is not random, but is closely linked to ancient environmental events. Over 150 years after Alfred Russel Wallace first mapped this boundary, it stands as a powerful reminder that Earth's ancient history leaves these lasting, undeniable marks on the natural world. Geography and evolution are permanently linked. You really can't understand the animals of today without understanding the Earth of yesterday.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to wrap things up. If a hidden underwater trench from an ancient ice age completely dictated the animal kingdoms of Southeast Asia and Australia, what other invisible boundaries from Earth's ancient past are secretly shaping the world around us today?